found herself in. But her belief as a Christian keeps her in that awful situation. So I know that being a Christian, and if I ever met a beautiful Christian, is this lady, being a Christian is no guarantee of a happy, successful union. We have to be realistic about that. I want to start our little discourse with a biblical story. How many of you are familiar with the story of Nabal, Abigail, and David? Nabal, it's all right, some of you. Can we go to the next slide? We'll start. These are the three main characters in the story: Nabal, Abigail, and David. Nabal was married, or Abigail was married to Nabal. Nabal, the Bible says the story is in 1 Samuel 25. The Bible says about him that he was a crude and mean man in all his dealings. He was crude and he was mean, which means that he did not care what he said or did. Nonetheless, Nabal, if you read his description in 1 Samuel 25, he is a descendant of Caleb. The Bible particularly points out that he is a descendant of Caleb. Caleb was one of the mighty men of Israel as they crossed Jordan. You remember his story. He was one of the few that stood up for righteousness. When the others wanted to surrender, Caleb was the one who stood up. So this man, Nabal, is a spiritual inheritor of Caleb's legacy. But yet, he was a crude and mean man. We unfortunately have crude and mean people in the church. I've always contended that if you are a child of God, you shouldn't be crude and mean. Some people think it's a virtue. Well, that's how I am. And if you can't take it, leave it. And yet, they would consider themselves as growing Christians. But a Christian is not crude or mean. We are thoughtful of others. And we learn to curb our natural desire to be that way. But Nabal was. And so, but he was, there are some other things about him. He was rich, right? So it would be a good catch for some people. He was a wealthy businessman. Ooh. And he was well known in the community. So it was sheep shearing time. So he was a shepherd. And so they used to share the sheep. There were certain times when they would share the sheep and use the wool to make clothing or whatever and sold it. And Nabal was busy doing that at the time. David sent some young men to Nabal and said to him, when your shepherds were in my area, David at the time was a young soldier, leader of a guerrilla band running from Saul. And so David sent his young men and said to Nabal, listen, when your shepherds were in my territory, we protected them. We took care of them. We made sure that no one interfered with the sheep, because, in those days, if you're a shepherd with a large flock, you were likely to be raided. People would, foreign soldiers, mercenaries, bandits, and others would raid your flock. And so if you have someone like David nearby with his soldiers, you are protected. So, I don't know if that's related in any way to the old mafia habit of, getting protection money from businesses, but we're not going to go there. We're going to look differently at David. So David did not hurt this man or his flock. And so when the sheep shearing time came, David sent his men and he said, now look, we protected you guys. We didn't hurt you. We didn't allow anyone to hurt you. So now that you are sharing, can you, send us a couple of sheep so we can have meat? And Nabal's reply was, I don't know who this David is. I don't know who David is. I mean, a lot of servants are escaping these days. I don't know who this David is. And so why don't you just leave my presence? I'm a busy man. I don't have time for this. And he insulted David's servants. And so the young men left his presence, and they went back and told David, Nabal says that, he doesn't care about you, and he has no intentions of sharing his stuff with you. And David got angry. David said, put on your swords. Strap on your weapons. And that's what they did. Now, in the meantime, enter the other character here, next slide, and that's Abigail. In contrast to Nabal, Abigail, the Bible says, was a sensible and beautiful woman. Can you understand that? Nabal was a crude and mean man, but he was married to a sensible and beautiful woman. So the servants heard what Nabal said to David's men. And so they ran to her because they knew she was the sensible one in the family. Right? I'm going to stay away from that. They knew she was the sensible one in the family. And so they ran to her and explained what this fool, Nabal, had said. And she knew David was going to be in trouble. She knew Nabal, her husband, was going to be in trouble. David was not going to take this lying down. And as a result of that, she took action. She immediately got some food, put it on the donkey, and she hurried to find David. And sure enough, David and his men were riding towards Nabal, all strapped up. They had their weapons on. David said, may the Lord do so unto me today if one person is left in Nabal's house alive today. So he was going to take revenge. He said, may the Lord do so to me if one person in that house is alive when I'm done today. So not only was Nabal going to be killed, his wife, the sensible and beautiful woman, was going to be killed, and all the servants and everybody. So she, understanding the situation, grasping the danger that they were in, took action. And she got on the donkey with a lot of food and so on, and hurried to meet David. So here comes the next character, our next main character. We've been talking about him, but now let's focus on him a little bit. David. David was going to be the next king of Israel. He had been anointed. Everybody knew it. He was going to be king. He was recognized as God's chosen. But yet, here is God's chosen, strapping on his weapons to go and kill everybody in Nabal's house. Being a child of God is no guarantee that you won't lose your temper and do some very bad stuff. So he knew that he could take them out. He was a powerful warrior. He had soldiers under his command. He knew he could do it. And he was on his way to doing it. Abigail, the beautiful and sensible woman, was the lifesaver here. When she met David, she said to him, she got off her donkey, she bowed to the ground, and the story said, she said, my Lord, here's the deal. We know that you are going to be king of Israel. We know that you have always acted morally right. You are respected. We know that you're anointed. You're the chosen one. But if you do this thing today, when you become king, you will have this blot on your record. So I want to ask you, King, are you willing to live with this blot on your record? And when David heard her speak, he said to her, you have rightly spoken. Because of your actions today, your house will be saved. He said, I have already decided that may the Lord do so to me if I leave one person in that house alive today. But your actions have saved not only the life of your household, but have stopped me from doing something that I would have been ashamed of after now. So the woman, Abigail, the sensible and beautiful woman, was the one whose action saved her household. So men, something I've discovered, that it is often assumed that men have the leadership in their household. But if he's a crude and mean man, you know what I'm saying, Pastor? It is often assumed, and I hear it said in church many times, that men should be the leaders of their household, priests, etc. But if he's a crude and mean man, if he's a man like Nabal, you, my dear, if you're the sensible one, excuse me, if you're the sensible one, may have to do that to save your household. If you are the sensible, godly one, you may have to do that to save your household. So the relationship between Nabal and Abigail and David shows us that as Christians, being spiritual people does not necessarily say to us that we will have successful marriages or relationships. Because not only should we know about God, not only should we claim to be followers of God, but we should also be growing followers of God. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to make two propositions to you here. One, the quality of our relationship with God determines the quality of our relationship with those close to us. The quality of our relationship with God determines the quality of our relationship with those who are close to us. Do you think you agree with me? So if my relationship with God is not what it can be, my relationship with those who are close to me will be affected. Not only that, I'll add something else here. Next slide. See what you think of this one. Spiritually mature persons have a higher quality relationship with God and with others. Spiritually mature people. Thank you very much. The cold one probably would have not worked very well. Spiritually mature persons have a higher quality relationship with God and with others. So people, my argument here is that people who are spiritually mature are going to have a higher quality relationship. Their relationship with God will be more enjoyable, will be more successful, will be more filled with happiness and peace and contentment. And as a result, their relationship with those who are close to them will also reflect those elements. They will have happier, more successful, more joyful, more contented relationships, both with their spouses, with their children, and with their fellow churchmen.